lesbian, and straight teacher network, which brings together gay and straight teachers to fight homophobia in their schools. GLSEN, as it is called, is today the largest such organization in the United States. In 1992, Kevin was appointed to co-chair the Education Committee of the Governor's Commission on Gay and Lesbian Youth by Massachusetts Governor William Weld. He was the principal author of its report, Making Schools Safe for Gay and Lesbian Youth, whose recommendations were adopted as policy by the Massachusetts State Board of Education in May 1993. The Commission led the fight which made Massachusetts the first state in the nation to outlaw discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation against public school students in December 1993. Kevin's books include Becoming Visible, a reader in gay and lesbian history for the high school and college students, and One Teacher in 10, gay and lesbian educators tell their stories. He is currently at work on a third book on openly gay and lesbian high school activists. We are proud to present this morning's speaker, Mr. Kevin Jennings.
Okay, I've been a high school teacher for 10 years, and I know you're mainly applauding because I got you out of class. Actually, I came in the fall, spoke to your faculty, and the main thing I remember is that light buzzing right there. Can you hear me over it? Is it loud enough? Okay, good. Before I kind of do my little talk today, I wanted to say something that I think is important for you to know. It's important for you to realize that there are 25 million gay and lesbian people in America, and that I'm only one of that population. I think sometimes for people who don't know many gay people, when they hear a gay person tell their story, they think that's what all gay people went through. It's important for you to recognize that gay people come in all colors, both genders, all religious backgrounds, from different parts of the country, and that when I tell my story, I'm simply telling my story. I don't speak for all gay people. I can only tell you what my experience has been. So don't assume that just because I experienced it this way, this is what everybody experiences. I call this talk American Dreams, and that's because when I was a little boy growing up in rural North Carolina, I honestly thought I was going to grow up to be president. Probably a lot of people do. I live in a country where we're told that anybody who works hard and is determined enough can aspire to the highest office in the land. And when I was a little boy, I thought I was going to live out that American dream. I began to realize, however, that something was wrong from an early age. And for you to understand this, I need to explain a little bit of my family background. I grew up in a little town called Louisville, North Carolina, which is just outside a city called Winston-Salem. If you're a smoker, you probably recognize Winston-Salem as the place where most of your cigarettes are made. Because of its incredible profits from the tobacco industry, the local multinational RJR Nabisco is actually the 7th largest company in the world today. Somehow the rising tide of prosperity that came from tobacco never laughed at my family's doors, and indeed, we were a bitter family. We tried to figure out why we had failed to make it in the land of opportunity, and we eagerly sought out scapegoats who we could blame. For my uncles and my cousins, they joined the Ku Klux Klan. For my uncles and my cousins, this meant joining the Ku Klux Klan, while my father, who was a fundamentalist minister who died when I was 8, used religion to excuse his prejudices against blacks, against Jews, against Catholics, against Yankees, against communists and liberals, basically the same thing as far as he was concerned, and of course against gay men and lesbians. Somehow the idea that you should do unto others as you would have them do unto you never made it into my father's version of the gospel. Instead, we were harangued against those people who we thought were responsible for our very real oppression. I grew up honestly calling black men niggers and thinking that they spent their days plotting to rape white women. I grew up believing a Jewish conspiracy controlled all the banks and all the media. I grew up believing a communist plot was undermining my nation. I graduated from high school in 1981, the year this year's seniors entered kindergarten. Some of you probably have brothers and sisters as old as I am, so I wanted you to have that in your mind to realize that this isn't some kind of ancient history I'm talking about. School offered me an avenue of escape from the poverty in which my family lived, and it was one which my mother was particularly determined that I take advantage of. To her own great regret, she'd never been able to do this herself, and for you to understand that, I have to explain her family background. My mother grew up in the mountains of eastern Tennessee, which is a region called Appalachia. Back in the 60s, when our government cared enough about poverty to declare war on it, Appalachia was the symbol of poverty in America. My family is among the poorest of the very poor people who live in Appalachia. The people like our family are called white trash by people who have more education or more money than we do. This was because my grandmother was orphaned when she was 2 years old when her parents died of tuberculosis or consumption as they called it back then. She was then shuttled between the homes of various relatives, none of whom wanted her, or more importantly, another mouth to feed back when the government didn't do anything whatsoever for poor people. Before you judge her relatives as uncaring for not wanting to take her in, keep in mind that every bit of food, every helping of grits, gravy, or fatback that she ate literally probably came right off their kids' plates or perhaps off their own. It's easy sometimes to be caring towards people less fortunate. You don't have to sacrifice anything yourself. Sometimes it's harder if you do. Luckily for my grandmother, she was a very attractive 11-year-old girl when my grandfather, William Johnson, a man 20 years older than her, came looking for a bride. Eager to get rid of her, my uncle married her off, and she had her first child when she was 13, her fourth child when she was 20, her ninth child when she was 30. All by an alcoholic man who was unable to work and who sexually abused his 5 daughters as soon as they came of age, which to him meant 8 or 9 years old. To my grandfather, children served 2 functions, the first of which I've already mentioned. The second was to make money. My mother was a star student. She was actually skipped ahead 2 grades in elementary school because she learned so quickly. But my grandfather thought 6th grade was enough education for anybody. So when she got to 6th grade, he made her drop out of school and go to work picking cotton and tobacco in the fields of local sharecroppers to help support the other 9 kids of the family. My mother never forgave them for this, and her shame over her own inability to have an education burns on her brow today like some kind of scarlet letter emblazoned there. In fact, the bitterness of my mother and her sisters was so strong that my strongest memory from childhood was my Aunt Frances spitting on my grandfather's face in his coffin at his funeral. In spite of, or perhaps because of their disappointment, my family's faith in education was really intense. I'm the youngest of 5 kids, and my father's profession as a minister never left a lot of money over for luxuries like college tuition for the older 4. This made my mother twice as determined that I, her last chance, was going to make it to college. Not that it was going to be easy. In the years after my father died, my mother actually supported our family working as a counter person at McDonald's, which was the only job she could get with a 6th grade education. My mother, however, even in this environment, was able to kind of show her intelligence. She was the kind of person who, no matter how much food you ordered, she could tell you the total as soon as you finished. One time in 3 years, she was 9 cents off. That's the most she ever missed by, and she never used a cash register. She missed by 3 cents one time in 9 years. Imagine the bitterness of my mother, who, except for the gender and class of the body into which it was born, had a mind that probably could have gone on to become a mathematician, or a scientist, or a teacher, or any number of things, but instead was doomed to solve the value of 3 Big Macs, 2 large fries, and a hot apple pie, day after day after day after day, until her entire life had passed before her eyes, who was forced to feed her 5 kids by bringing home leftover hamburgers that the restaurant was going to throw out. I always think about that when I pass McDonald's like I did on the way up here, because I think I'm the only person who eats McDonald's and thinks, just like Mom used to make. Because that was often the only food she could afford to bring home for dinner. Imagine how determined she was that I not share her faith. Imagine how I began to doubt early on this myth that everybody who works hard gets ahead in America. As you might expect, my mother taught me a lot about obstacles you'd have to overcome in life, but some of them were obstacles that not many people have to face anymore today. When I was in 2nd grade, Winston-Salem schools were integrated through forced busing, in which white children were bused to black neighborhoods and black children were bused to white neighborhoods. The first day of school that day, I remember lying on the floor of the bus. I was one of only 3 white kids to get on the bus that day, because local members of the KKK had been blasting out the windows of the buses with sawed-off shotguns to try and intimidate white people out of going to school. Everyone knew that my Uncle Fred, who lived across the street from us, was the head of the local branch of the KKK. That night, my mother was summoned across the street to talk to my Uncle Fred, who was very unhappy that we were the only white family on our street to board the bus that day and go to school. My father had died 3 months before, and my mother was literally dependent on my Uncle Fred at that point for help paying the rent. My mother also stands about 5'1" and weighs maybe 100 pounds on a good day. My Uncle Fred's about 6'4" and weighs about 220. Nevertheless, I remember my mother saying to my Uncle Fred that if any children were hurt on the buses the next day, she would find out who was responsible, and to quote her exactly, they would wish they had never been born. I also knew that all the sawed-off shotguns that were being used on the buses were in his garage. I could see them as a young boy. I'll never forget the image of my mother, a very small woman, talking back to a very big man, when she had everything to lose for standing up for what she believed in. And I thought about that as the years have gone by, and I thought, that is the definition of courage, standing up for what you believe in when you've got everything to lose. My own adolescence seemed to bear out this faith that my mother had placed in the American dream and her incredible determination to overcome any obstacles that stood in her way. I worked hard and I got ahead, just like the dream said I would, earning a full scholarship to Harvard and early admission because I had remade myself so thoroughly into what I thought an educated person looked, sounded, and acted like. Little did I realize at this point the price I was paying to fit in. The first thing to go was any sign of being from the South. As I came into contact with mainstream America, I began to realize that Southerners were just kind of different. The types of things we eat, such as turnip greens or red-eyed gravy, just kind of don't show up in the Harvard dining hall. I don't know why. And the very sound of a Southern accent at Harvard generally gets people to snicker because they think you must be either stupid or racist or both. As the lesbian writer Blanche Boyd put it, when television programs appeared, a dreadful truth became apparent to me. Southerners are not normal people. We do not sound like normal people, and what we choose to talk about seems peculiarly different also. I began to realize we were hicks. I didn't want to be a hick. I decided to go north where people walked fast, talked fast, and acted cool. Like Blanche Boyd, I too became desperate to leave the South as a young kid. I erased my accent by imitating newscasters such as Dan Rather on television. I chose colleges using only one criterion, that they not be in the South. I never invited anybody home from my college for fear they would meet my family and realize that they were worthless, ignorant hicks, which is how I'd come to view the people I loved. I ran as far away from Louisville, North Carolina as I conceivably could. There were some things about myself, however, that I couldn't run away from and I couldn't change, among them the fact that I am gay. I had always known I was gay, before I'd even heard that word or knew what it meant. I remember at age 6 or 7 not being interested in my brother's Playboys, no matter how often he tried to get me to look at them, but somehow knowing that this was probably something I should keep to myself. As I grew up and came to understand what my feelings were and what they were called in this society, I recoiled in horror from myself. I think at this point I need to probably stop and correct a misperception that some people still have. Despite the overwhelming evidence to the contrary, some people still think that people choose to be gay, or I guess choose to be straight for that matter. If so, why would any 13-year-old, which is the average age at which someone realizes whether they're gay or straight, choose to be gay in America in 1995? From an early age, and you all know this is true, "that's so gay" is the most common put-down in school, and calling someone a faggot or a dyke is the best way to make them unpopular. If this kind of verbal harassment isn't enough, there's always the physical violence directed towards gay people. According to the Reagan administration, hardly a pro-gay source, gay and lesbian people are the #1 victims of hate crimes in America today. The way this works out is that 1 out of every 5 gay people are attacked and physically injured each year in the streets of our society simply because they're gay. 2 years ago, a young sailor named Alan Schindler was literally kicked to death on his ship by other soldiers who did not want to see the ban on gays in the military lifted. According to the New York Times, and I'll quote here, Helvey, which is the sailor which killed Schindler, Helvey stalked Schindler into a public toilet and beat him to death because he was a homosexual. Helvey kicked Schindler to death, crushing his skull and mutilating his body so badly that Schindler's mother could only identify her son by a tattoo she recognized on his left arm. If this potential violence wasn't enough to scare 13-year-olds off, they could always think about the discrimination that gay people face in America. In 42 out of 50 states, including New Hampshire, you can be fired from your job for being gay, and there is nothing you can do about it. In the state of Colorado in 1992, in fact, they prohibited protecting gay people from discrimination. If you can understand what I'm saying here. They said not only could you not protect gay people, it was against the law to try to protect gay people from discrimination. In 24 states, including Massachusetts and New Hampshire, you can actually be arrested for having sex in the privacy of your own home with another adult, thanks to the so-called sodomy laws that are still on the books. In Massachusetts, this carries a 10 to 20-year prison term. Unless you think these are kind of old laws left over from Pilgrim times, in 1986, the Supreme Court, in a decision called Hardwick versus Bowers, upheld the right of the state of Georgia to enter the home of a man named Michael Hardwick and arrest him in his bedroom while he was having sex with his boyfriend. Now let's go back and revisit the idea that people choose to be gay. People would choose a lifestyle that promises verbal harassment, potential arrest, job discrimination, and physical violence over a lifestyle that promises career acceptance, social acceptance, and all those great gifts that straight people get when they get married, which by the way is also illegal for gay people in all 50 states. I find it hard to think of too many 13-year-olds who would choose to be gay. And certainly when I was your age, I would have chosen to be straight if I could have. Having been so determined to live out the American dream, I was not about to let the fact that I was gay stand in my way. I decided that if my spirit was weak, perhaps my flesh would be more willing at the prospect of heterosexuality, and maybe if I just did it enough, I would get it right. I'm sure a lot of you know a boy a lot like me at Timberlane today. I was the kid who told faggot jokes louder than anyone else in the locker room. I was the kid who always tried to see how far he could get on the first date with every girl he went out with. I was the kid who made fun of anybody who might be a little different. The reason I did that was because what I really hated was myself. And I thought that if I somehow put down people who were like me, no one would suspect that I was gay. But the fact of the matter is, no matter how often I got drunk or how often I got stoned, which I did on a daily basis by the time I was a senior, sometimes 2 and 3 times a day, I could not escape from the fact that I was gay. Senior year was also the year I fell in love for the first time, except it happened to be with another boy in my class who also turned out to be gay. The day after the first time we had been together, I woke up and realized that what we had done made it true. I really was a faggot after all. All those years of having sex with girls, all those years of trying to deny it, had not changed this basic fact about who I was. I spent that day trying to figure out how I could live out the American dream and be gay, and I decided by nightfall that that wasn't possible. So I went into my family's medicine cabinet. I took out the economy-sized bottle of aspirin that we had, and I proceeded to wash down 140 of them with a glass full of vodka. You might wonder why I remembered the exact number, 140. Well, I figured you could probably only swallow about 10 pills at once, so I made 14 stacks before I started. Luckily for me, one of my friends got me to a hospital and I survived. Unfortunately, my story is hardly unique. According to the Bush administration, 1 out of every 3 gay and lesbian teens will try to commit suicide during adolescence. I took these statistics a few months ago and broke them down, and it comes out like this. Every 35 minutes in this country, that's less time that we're here today, is less than 35 minutes. So think about it that way. During the time we're here today, a gay or lesbian youth somewhere in this country will try to kill him or herself because of homophobia. Every 5.5 hours, a gay or lesbian youth succeeds. At the school I teach at in Concord, our school day is 6 hours long. So that means every day I teach at school somewhere a gay kid kills him or herself because of homophobia. My story has a happy ending, but I want you to keep those statistics in mind and remember that a lot of them don't. Most important lessons I learned at college had nothing to do with history, which is what I majored in. Instead, I learned the importance of taking control over your life and making decisions about what you want out of it. I met a great professor who taught me that as long as I stayed in the closet, I was accepting society's judgment that there was something wrong with me that I needed to hide. After all, as my favorite bisexual, Eleanor Roosevelt, once put it, no one can make you feel inferior without your consent. By staying closeted, I was consenting to society's judgment that I was inferior simply because of my sexual orientation. This made me realize that for years I had let a dream, a beautiful, seductive, but ultimately false dream, dictate my choices in life. I had willingly made that choice and willingly paid its price, which included sacrificing my culture, my family, and ultimately my own self-esteem. However, I began to realize that these sacrifices were far greater than any reward I could possibly hope to get. And since that day, I've made my own decisions about what I want to do with my life, instead of accepting a path that I had been told was right for far too long, when in fact, it wasn't right for me. Once I started down this path, I began to look around society and notice a lot of things about it and ask a lot of questions. The answers to these questions weren't always pleasant. Some of these questions were ones like this. Why was my brother not spoken to by anyone in my family for 4 years after he fell in love with and married a black woman? Why did everyone in my family say that if you wanted to cheat someone, that meant you wanted to Jew them? Why did my mother earn less money than men who did exactly the same job that she did? Why did everyone in our neighborhood work so hard but have so little? I began to realize that these inequalities weren't an accident, that they were part of the game. A game where the people who are the real majority of this country, people who are female, people who are gay or lesbian, people who are people of color, people who are Jewish, who represent, I might point out, 80% of the American society, would always lose out to that real minority. the wealthy, white, heterosexual Christian men who've won our presidency 42 out of 42 times. Now, if you're in a football pool like me and you see a team that's won 42 out of 42 times, you tend to bet on that team. So the reality is these inequalities couldn't be an accident. Instead, I discovered that this true freedom would have to come when we realized that everyone was a real American and that we didn't have to accept somebody else's definition of that in order to be accepted. Power means little if women have to become masculine iron ladies to get it, if people of color have to learn to act and speak white, if Jews have to Americanize their customs, or if gays and lesbians have to hide who they are in order to hold it. Real freedom would be ours if all of these people were accepted that we were all real Americans, and that we didn't need to change to be somebody else's version of what a real American was. When he was 19 years old, the gay African-American poet Langston Hughes put it best in this poem. Tomorrow, I'll be at the table when company comes. No one will dare say to me, eat in the kitchen. Then, besides, they'll see how beautiful I am and be ashamed, for I too am America. As I've grown older, though, I began to realize that it isn't only people from so-called minority groups who suffer from the American dream. This dream demands that everybody pay a price if they want its rewards, and often people who seem to be winning at the game I mentioned earlier are paying a hidden cost for their success. After all, how free are white people in this country who won't go into cities because they're afraid of their fellow citizens who aren't white? How free are wealthy people in this country who feel like they have to retreat behind alarmed and bolted doors each evening out of fear of their fellow citizens who aren't wealthy? How free are those of us who walk past the homeless in our cities with our eyes down, our heads averted, because we can't look them in the eye because we're ashamed that there are people living on the street in this, the world's most affluent country? How free are straight men in this society who won't show their emotions in public for fear somebody might call them faggot if they do? I'm reminded of the reaction of the lesbian novelist Virginia Woolf when she was excluded from an all-male library because of her gender. She wrote, I thought of the shut doors of the library and how unpleasant it is to be locked out. And then I thought how worse it is, perhaps, to be locked in. Leaving me with the question, who really suffers more? Those of us who are locked out by prejudice, or those of us who are locked in by the fear upon which prejudice is based? We can have a truly free country when we can all live our lives without fear. This became a dream I wanted to pursue when I graduated from college, but quite honestly, I had no idea how to make it a reality. So I started looking around for what kind of career I could follow that would allow me to do that. I looked back and I realized that for me, teachers had made the difference, allowing me to get a scholarship to college and to have a much better life than my parents had had. So I decided I wanted to go back and become a teacher to help young people achieve a truly American dream. I've been teaching U.S. history for 10 years, and I think I found a good document upon which we can build a truly American dream. It reads something like this. We hold these truths to be self-evident. All people are created equal. They are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are the rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I'm sure you've all read those words before, but I sometimes wonder if in America we've ever really listened to the Declaration of Independence and taken it to heart. Injustice exists in America because we, the governed, have given our consent to it. We have the right to alter or abolish it, promised to us in our Declaration of Independence and our Constitution. We have only to choose to exercise that right if we want to see injustice and inequality come to an end in our country. We have to realize that there can be no true liberty and no true happiness as long as homophobia, racism, sexism, and other forms of discrimination are built into our society and our ways of thinking. Only if it becomes truly self-evident that we are all created equal can we be said to have achieved an American dream. Whenever I get the chance to talk to high schools, the history thing comes back to me because I think about young people in the past and the decisions they've had to make. In the 1930s, there was a generation of people much like you in Germany. The majority of them were not Jewish. The majority of them were Christian. And they were faced with a choice. They saw what was happening to Jews in their society. And they thought, we can either stand up for them, in which case we might have to fight, or we can go about our lives and pretend that we know nothing is happening. You all know the decision that young people in Germany made in the 30s, and you know how they're remembered today by historians. Now, in the 1960s, there was a generation of young people much like you in the United States. The majority of them were not black, the majority of them were white, but they saw what was happening to black people, and they knew they had to make a decision. They could stand up and fight, or they could close their eyes and pretend that they didn't know what was going on. Well, a lot of those young people went down to the South. A lot of them literally got on buses and risked their lives in order to fight for ending discrimination in this country on the basis of race. And we know how they're remembered today by historians. Well, it's 1995, and there's another generation of young people in America, the majority of whom are not gay. However, they look around and they see what's happening to gay people. They see the discrimination that goes on in this society. And your generation has to make a decision. And the question I put to you is this: how do you want to be remembered? Do you want to be remembered like the young people of Germany in the 30s? Or do you want to be remembered like the young people of America in the 1960s? None of us gets to pick what time we're born in. We only can deal with the situations that come our way. And in 1995, the situation that is the cutting edge of the human rights movement in America is discrimination against gay people. And you are the only ones who can bring that to an end, because you are the future of this country. And the question that I want you to think about before we leave today is, how do you want people in the future to remember you? I think that one of the great things about the Constitution is that we realize that we, the people, can establish justice and secure the blessings of liberty and posterity in this country if we truly want to. The great thing about America is that it is our country and our responsibility. The downside of that is when things are going wrong, we need to take responsibility for it. If there is inequality in this country, we in the end have no one to blame but ourselves, because it is our system. If there is injustice in the country, we are the only ones who can take the action to make it end. If there is a problem that needs confronting, we, the people, must confront it. I hope that today you'll leave here thinking about how you can confront the problems our country faces, and how you can use your power as a citizen to bring them to an end. And you know, all times when I go to places, I hear a lot about PC and politically correct and how this is a PC issue. I wanted to close by helping you realize something. When you hear something about a PC issue like homophobia or racism and sexism, step back and remember for a second that everyone in this country shares the same dream. And that dream is a pretty basic one. A dream that someday we can all have the rights to be safe, to pursue our lives the way we want to, and to not be discriminated against, beaten up, or fired from our jobs because of it. That's not a PC issue. That's a human issue. It's a dream we can all relate to. I hope you'll go out and pursue that, the most American dreams of all, and make it true for the people of your generation. I think we're just about done, and you have homeroom in 5 minutes, so let's stop and I'll take a couple questions. Thanks for listening. I had them hand out little note cards in case you wanted to write your question down and pass it up, because I know sometimes it's hard to raise your hand and ask questions in front of hundreds of other people. So if you want to write a question down and pass it up, that's fine. If you want to ask a question, that's fine too. And as you can imagine, given my family background, I've heard a lot of questions over the years. If I don't want to answer something, I just won't answer it. Don't be shy about asking. I feel like Bill Donahue here. Yeah. I got a grade as I get in high school. I went to a really bad high school, really bad, where, God, I don't even say it. It was so bad that in one of my classes, kids would sit in the back of the class and get stoned, and the teacher didn't know what was going on. So it wasn't very hard. It wasn't very hard to get A's in the classes I went to. I think for me, though, the real education I got was outside of the classroom, because in the classroom not much was going on, but I learned a lot from the other kids, because we had to live through things like busing and all, and we got a real first-hand education in human relations, and that was the best thing I got out of my high school. I can't really say that I got much academically out of it. When I went to college, I'd never written a paper longer than 3 pages. And I remember the first time I had to write a term paper, having to go and ask the professor what's a footnote, because I didn't know. So it was pretty poor academic preparation. What kind of grades I get at Harvard? I graduated magna cum laude and I was the commencement speaker, so basically that's the equivalent of being valedictorian. I think that what happened for me there was kind of finding a purpose in life, which when I was in high school I didn't really have. Because I felt so insecure because of who I was. And at Harvard, I got a lot more self-confidence and was able to do a lot better. I've never been asked about a grade point average before. Yeah. No, I didn't get bad grades. It was very easy to get good grades in the place I went to school because it was such a bad school. You could get good grades without doing anything. I think what it was is very few people from the background I come from get to go to places like Harvard. And so I think that Harvard was intrigued to have somebody like me. Because there's still, if we get it quiet a little bit, just because I can't barely hear, I think that there's still a lot of inequality in this country, and they were intrigued to have somebody from a pretty unusual background apply there. No one from my high school had ever applied to an Ivy League college before. Yep. Yeah, I did. I was actually on the football team when I was a freshman and sophomore. And then my family moved, and we moved to a school that had a boys volleyball team, and I played that instead because I was this height in 7th grade, so I was like a big kid when I was little, and I stopped growing. So like when I was in 9th grade, I could play football, but it's like everybody else got bigger, it became a little harder for me. Let me answer these here. Okay, let me answer these two really quickly. How did your classmates react after finding out that you were gay? Well, I didn't come out until I was at Harvard, and I really didn't really have an issue with it. I actually expected people to freak out, and they didn't. And the lesson I learned from that is if you're secure in who you are, people will generally accept you. The last question I have here is, are you happy? I'm glad somebody asked that one. If there's any lesson you get from my story today, I hope it has nothing to do with my being gay. I hope it has basically one lesson for you. And that's that in the end, you are the only one who can determine whether or not you're happy. The fact of the matter is, sometimes people ask me, does it bother you when people call you faggot? And the answer is, it makes me mad, but no, it doesn't bother me. Because what I see when a person calls me faggot is a person who's so insecure that all they can do is put down another group of people so that they can try and make themselves feel better. I don't need to do that to someone else because I'm secure in who I am. So bear in mind that when you see people who are using bigoted terms like faggot and nigger and things like that, what they're really saying is, I don't like myself very much. And I need to put down another group of people so that I can feel better about who I am. So for me, I would say to answer the question is I'm really happy because I finally accepted who I was and decided to live my life the way I wanted to instead of being afraid of the names and decisions that other people are going to make for me. And when you find people who are labeling you with any kind of label, bear in mind that all that shows is that they have a problem. There's nothing wrong with you. There's something wrong with how they view themselves. Eric tells me that, I'll take questions afterwards, but Eric tells me that y'all have homeroom and I have to let you go. But I'll answer your questions here as well.
Let me just tell you about what we're going to do. We need you to go to homeroom. If you have some general questions, as you exit, please just leave them on the desk. After homeroom, you'll get called back down to the gym, and we have some teachers here who will be spending 4th period talking with you about these very issues. So if you have any personal questions...
Crystal Baldock to the office, please. Crystal Baldock.
Quickly, everyone. Can I have your attention, please? We called you back early. We called you back early because Mr. Jennings thought he had to leave a little bit earlier, but he's a teacher also, and he has a class at 11:30 in Concord, Mass., but he's graciously decided to try to stick around till about 11:15 and then break all land speed records to get back to his class in Concord, Mass. It won't be the first time he says. Because there are a lot of great questions that you wrote down, and I don't think anyone but Kevin can answer them best since many of them are personal questions. And so he'll address some of these questions, and after he has to leave, and right at 11:15, he and I have to run toward his car, and I'll block for him so he can get in his car and get out of here. And then Mr. Leary, the center, and Ms. Lundquist will entertain any other general questions, and then we'll send you back to class probably before the end of period 4. Thanks for your attention last period, and I'll bring back Kevin.
Yeah, even though it's probably going to make me late to school, I really wanted to stay because I really appreciated the fact that you listened really carefully and your questions were really, really good. And there were three kind of basic categories of questions I was reading that I really wanted to have a chance to try and answer. And I'm going to talk really fast because I also want to have a chance for you to raise your hand if you want, okay? This was the first set of questions that were intriguing to me, okay? It's like three different ones. I'm going to kind of read them all together. Is religion still an issue for you? Do you believe that God would make and create people to sin, which is what I believe being gay is? Do you believe that all people are born gay? Why? Do you believe in, actually I read it in the wrong order. It starts with, do you believe people are born gay? Why? Do you believe in God? Do you believe that God agrees with people being gay? Do you believe that God would make, create people to sin, which is what I believe being gay is? And then somebody passed another note and after said, I was the one that asked the question about God. I just want you to know that I'm not prejudiced. In fact, I have no problem with diversity. The only problem I have is wondering how gays and lesbians feel about how God looks upon them. As you can imagine, having had a dad who's a minister, this is a question, these kind of questions are ones I've spent a lot of time thinking about in my life. So I wanted to have a chance to talk to you about them because I think that a lot of people do have strong religious backgrounds, and having come from one myself, I think it's important that we address them. First, let me provide some basic factual information. Religious denominations are all over the map in terms of how they regard gay and lesbian people. Some religious denominations, such as the Unitarians or Reformed Jewish synagogues, will actually bless gay marriages. Some religious denominations, such as Southern Baptists, where I grew up, would kick you out of the church if they knew you were gay. So it's important to recognize that I think sometimes we tend to stereotype in this country. We tend to say like, oh, all Christians hate all gay people. And that's just not true. That there are a lot of Christian denominations that are accepting of gay people, and that there are a lot of Christian denominations who are not. So that's important to recognize first of all. So I don't think there's necessarily an opposition between Christianity and homosexuality, and neither do a lot of churches. Secondly, the basis upon which some Christians feel that they should discriminate against gay people is largely taken from the book of Leviticus. This is where my having had to memorize 25 Bible verses a night when I was a little kid comes in handy. In the same chapter in Leviticus, there are also scriptures that prohibit you from shaving. Looking around to see if anybody violated that one today. There are prescriptions that prohibit you from wearing clothes that are made of more than one fabric. Check your label. And there are prescriptions that prohibit you from eating shellfish. So if any of you have had lobster or clams or anything last year, you've done that. These are all in the same book. Now, for me, you can find all kinds of scriptures in the Bible if you want. And
Simon Cotter to the office now. Simon Cotter. Crystal Bolduck to the office.
and you can pursue them. Now what's interesting to me is why do some people choose to pursue the one in Leviticus around people being gay, but not choose to pursue the one in Leviticus around wearing clothes of a different fabric, even though they are in the same book of the Bible? So that to me made me think more about, instead of the rules of the Bible, what's the spirit of the Bible? What is the central message of the Bible? And for me, that comes back to what Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount, which, if you remember, was, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And there's, for me, the message of that, and it's the message I try to live by, is that I should treat other people the way I would want to be treated myself. And I learned a really good lesson about this from a man named Bill Johnson. Some of you maybe have seen him speak on television or something. Bill Johnson is a Boston police captain, and his job is to investigate crimes against people based on their sexual orientation. Bill Johnson is a 60-year-old Irish Catholic straight man. And we were appearing once on a television show together, and I said in between, like, breaks, I said, Bill, I just got to hear from you. How'd you end up with this job? You know, you're like the last person in the world I would expect to be doing this job. And he said, well, I ended up in this job because I'm Catholic. And I was like, really? Given the attitude of some Catholic clergy, I'm surprised. And he said, well, the way I look at it is this. Someday I'm going to die, and I'm probably, hopefully, going to go to heaven. I'm going to get to the gates of heaven. And there's going to be someone there who's going to ask me the questions that will determine whether or not I get in. And I think the central question will be, did I do unto others as I would have them do unto me? And I imagine, what if the person at the gates is a black lesbian? What will she say to me? If she says to me, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, will I be able to answer that the way I want to be able to answer it? So for me, Captain Johnson said, I try to think of people who are not like myself and how I treat them. because it's easy to treat people well if they're like me. It's harder for me to treat people well if they're not like me. That to me is a very, to me it feels like a very Christian statement. I understand that not everybody here is Christian, but I think that that's a spirit that if we could all live by, we'd have a much better society. So that's kind of the way that I resolve the religious issue, and it brings me actually to another question that somebody asked. If courage is best shown by standing up for what you believe in, despite having a lot to lose, isn't it ironic that we were made to sit here and listen despite our own personal beliefs? And I assume that what this person is saying is they have personal beliefs and disagree with mine.
Mandy McGowan to the office now, please. Mandy McGowan.
I think that's great. I think the fact of the matter is, America will be a real democracy when two people can sit in the same room, express completely different opinions, and respect each other, even though they completely disagree. Because, let me let you know a little secret about freedom of speech. It's really easy to give freedom of speech to people you agree with. Right? It's a lot harder to give freedom of speech to people you disagree with. The fact of the matter is this is a very diverse country with a lot of different points of view. And we don't want to become a country with only one point of view. What we want to become is a country where you can hold your point of view and not be persecuted and discriminated against because you hold it. I have nothing wrong with whoever it is who disagrees with me. I promise that I would not fire them from a job simply because they disagree with me. If they were a good teacher, they could communicate history well, and they could get the kids to learn, great, come teach at my school. That's all I ask you to do for me. Give me the opportunity to be judged based on who I am, rather than what I think or what I believe. Yep. Uh-huh. Well, my understanding was that people could opt out of the assembly if they wanted to. Well, I guess you need to find out like where the communication broke down there. But I think the thing is that rather than focusing, I mean, I would hope you wouldn't be punished because that kind of defeats the purpose to me. I guess the way I'd like to think about it is this. I would respect you having the chance to say what you think. And what I ask is you respect me having the chance to say what I think. I have come from a family where, believe me, we have very divergent views on this point of view. But we all manage, my older brother and I, and my ex-husband and I, and my brother who works for Senator Jennings, if you know who that is, and his wife all had Thanksgiving dinner together about 3 years ago. You can imagine, this is a pretty diverse group of people around the table. But we managed to sit there and respect one another. And I think that's the essence of American society. I don't want everybody in America to do the same. I want everybody in America to be able to respect people who are not like them and to grant them an equal chance. That's what America's about. America's not about making us all think the same way. That's completely antithetical to everything our country's founded on. This brings me to the last set of questions. I think I'm going to finish in time to have like 5 or 10 more minutes for your questions because I have 10:35 by my watch. Okay, 3 questions, all related. I thought there have been marriages between gay people. Are these done but not recognized by law? The answer to that is yes. Many churches will marry gay people, but they're not recognized as legal by the state. So this means that a lot of the benefits you get when you get married, such as things like family health coverage and stuff like that, gay people don't get. Do you have a boyfriend? Are you attached? If so, do you get any comments? And this kind of relates back to the marriage question. And without getting too personal, I was married to another man for 9 years, and I got divorced about 6 months ago. And I think that the first lesson I have from that is to understand that, remember I said earlier that it's not a PC issue, it's all like human beings trying to live the same way? A divorce hurts just as much when you're gay as it does when you're straight, all right? And one of the things that I realized through that was my best female friend was getting divorced from her husband at the same time. And I realized that her relationship was straight and mine was gay, but boy, the feelings were just about the same. So remember that beneath all of these differences, it's the same human being who goes through the same range of feelings, okay? Can I take the second question to follow that? Do I get any comments? Yes, I have been verbally harassed on the street for being publicly affectionate with my boyfriend in Boston. The fact of the matter is that when I was in high school, actually, I was fag bashed and had my right hand broken fairly badly. If you look at these fingers, you can see they're still bent. I also had this tooth knocked out. I got the other one knocked out playing ice hockey in junior high. So I learned a lesson from that, and I took martial arts and self-defense classes, and somebody did try to physically harass me a few months ago, and they spent some time in the hospital. My theory about it is that it's my city as much as it's anybody else's, and I'm going to live my life and exercise the same rights that everybody else has, and I'm going to be able to protect myself should I be harassed. I want to be able to do what anybody else in this society does, and if that includes holding hands with my boyfriend in the street, I'm going to do it, and I'm not going to be intimidated out of doing it by somebody who's going to harass me. And the fact of the matter is, remember, it's your society. You have the same right to do things that everybody else does. Don't let people take that away from you. They don't deserve it. You had a question? She asked if it's not legally recognized, how do you get a divorce? I use the term divorce, but you're right, we didn't have to go to court and do those kind of things. Though since we did own a house together, we had to get a lawyer and everything and do it. So it's not legally recognized as a divorce. I use the term divorce just to help people understand what it's like. Because if you've been with someone for 9 years and then you end it, calling it breaking up kind of trivializes it a little bit, you know? So I use the term divorce to help people understand that it's just as painful for a gay couple that's been together for 9 years to separate as it is for a married straight couple to separate. Back then. How old am I? I'm 31. How old did you think I was? No, my ex-husband and I had met in college, so that's why we got married fairly young, which is another thing I discourage you from doing, whether you're gay or straight. Okay, I probably have like 2 or 3 more minutes for questions, so do people have something they want to yell out? Oh, sorry, you asked a question?
How do you feel about bisexual? Some gays think that they're confused or whatever, and they don't know, like, if they're like a lesbian or gay. How do you feel about bisexual?
The question is, how do I feel about bisexual people? Well, I think it's important for you to understand that when we talk about sexuality, people actually fall along a spectrum from 0 to 6, according to studies, and that if you're exclusively gay, that's a 6, and to the light of gay people, if you're exclusively straight, that makes you a 0. Now, the reality is that some people fall in the middle of that spectrum. Some people fall more towards 0, some people fall more towards 6. Apparently about 10% of people are gay, a much smaller percentage, 2 or 3% of people are bisexual, and about 87% of people are straight, according to most surveys. So I think the reality is there are some genuinely bisexual people, and I think they do have a hard time, because straight people want to think that they're just gay, and gay people want to believe that they're just confused. So I think sometimes it's very difficult for bisexual people. I think for me, I went through a period of calling myself bisexual because I really didn't want to be gay. And I think that a lot of gay people went through a period like that, so they tend to be skeptical around bisexual people, but I think people are starting to become more sensitive and understand that just that there are genuinely bisexual people, that not everybody who's bisexual is just saying it. Yeah? Yeah, I've been out to my students for 6 years. I came out in 1988, before there was a gay rights law in my state. I'll be honest with you, I really thought that students would distance themselves from me as a result of my coming out of the closet. I really thought that I would go from being like a teacher that people liked to being a teacher who nobody would sign up for his classes. I learned a really important lesson about that, and I really am really hopeful about your generation, because what I've seen over and over again is that the students are willing to accept me for who I am and whether or not I'm a good teacher, and not judge me based on my sexual orientation. I think the reason for that is y'all have grown up in a time when, like, you've heard a lot more about gays than people my age did. Like, for instance, there was a whole gays in the military debate, it was on the news every night, stuff like that. For people who were in their 30s, like us, that just did not happen. It was never in the news. So I think that your generation, bluntly, is less freaked out around gay people than my generation, if you want my honest opinion. I look at things like The Real World and how the Pedro character on that was like a popular character and people weren't freaked out. And stuff like that, and that just couldn't happen when I was in high school. So the lesson I learned was I thought that the kids would be freaked out. I realized that that was my putting my issues onto them. they were fine. I was the one who had a problem. They were okay about it. I had never, honestly, ever had a problem with any student in my school in 6 years. Never. If I've had problems, it's come from other teachers. Any other? Yeah, back there. Parents of students, how do I feel about them and how they reacted to me? I've had one or two parents who've been kind of freaked out. They generally have been parents of kids who are gay, and they're freaked out because they don't want their kid to be gay, and they think that somehow I made their kid gay. And they generally tend to come around. I think at first it's just they're a little panicked because they're afraid of their kid getting picked on and their kid having a tough life because they're gay. And then once they come around, they understand better. But at first, sometimes they have been a problem. Honestly, though, that's only 2 parents in 6 years of teaching. The majority of parents seem to be fine about it. And in fact, I started this organization, which was mentioned in the introduction, called the Gay, Lesbian, and Straight Teachers Network, which is this national organization that brings together teachers to address homophobia in schools. Some of the biggest donations we've gotten have actually been from parents of kids I've taught. So I think for a lot of the parents, it's been kind of an education also. I think they probably, if you had asked them beforehand, do you want your kid to have a gay teacher, they would have said no way. And then afterwards, they realized that my being gay was irrelevant, that whether or not I was a good teacher was the issue, and they supported our organization. So that's been really encouraging for me, because once again, I thought that the parents would freak out, and with only a couple of exceptions, it's been completely the opposite. They've been really supportive. Last question. How does my family feel about my being gay, basically, is the question. Well, my father died, as I mentioned, and my uncle who ran the Ku Klux Klan is dead now, too. He died when I was a teenager, so I never came out to him. So I basically would focus that question on how is my mother regarded, because my mother's 70 years old now. She, you know her background. She's from this little town. She had a 6th grade education. She actually thought until she was 16 years old that Jews had horns, because the picture in her Bible of Moses had horns, so she thought that all Jews had horns. You know, that's kind of how ignorant the background she came from was. And at first, when I first came out, my mother was a little freaked out. My mother went on to found the first chapter of an organization called Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gays in the state of North Carolina. This little 70-year-old woman did this. And for me, she's like the great hopeful story, because I look at my mother, who's the kind of person who people always say can't change. She's too old, she's too stuck in her ways, she can't change her views, and she changed her views. And I feel like if my mother can change her views, that gives me hope that everybody can learn to be accepting, because she learned, and she was supposedly too old to do that. So my mother's a really encouraging story for me. And in the 9 years I was married, my partner and I went home for Thanksgiving every year, spent it with my mom, and went home for Christmas every year, spent it with his mom and dad. And my mother accepted it just as she accepted her other kids' marriages. So I feel like if my mom can change, everybody can change. So it's kind of hopeful for me. Okay, I think that's it. I'm going to turn the microphone over to your teachers so they can continue the discussion. Your questions were really, really great, and I really appreciate you asking them. Thanks.